Okay, here we go. This is Mr. Beckett speaking. Here we go. We're working on just a real quick recap of the lecture we had today in class about Karl Marx. So there's Karl Marx. Looks kind of like Santa Claus, but well, like I said earlier today, one of the most important thinkers and philosophers of the 1800s. So once again, the 1800s was an era of great change and upheaval. For the first time in our modern human life, uh, you could imagine the world would be profoundly different when you died as opposed to the world that you're born into. Inventions like the steam engine gave rise to factories and the Industrial Revolution, in which the working conditions were absolutely brutal. So there was a new class of wealthy people who owned the factories and a new class of poor people that worked in the factories. Some of the hugely important thinkers: Freud, who basically invented psychology; Darwin, who invented the theory of evolution, and as well the idea of natural selection, which is the basis for biology even today; and Marx, who came up with the system of politics called communism, and really a system that led to most of the wars after world well most of the wars in the 20th century were all had something to do with communism. Communism was involved in many of those wars. Basically, what Marx said was that class struggle was the important and defining thing in our society, and really the important and defining thing in history. So there was a ruling class or bourgeoisie of wealthy people, and a working class, a proletariat, and they were the working people. So the ruling class and the working class, the bosses and the workers, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. And you can see here we've got our gentlemen in the top and our workers in the bottom. The workers also included women and children, and they worked under brutal and dangerous conditions for little pay, basically in poverty. So class struggle was the most important thing that Marx saw. He said the bourgeoisie gained wealth and profit by exploiting the proletariat, and he believed that all of human history could be understood by this class struggle. So going back to, all the way back to the ancient times, uh, we could look at history and understand it as a struggle between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, or the workers and the bosses. Marx thought basically that class struggles would eventually lead to a revolution between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. The proletariat would rise up and overthrow the bourgeoisie, taking control of all the capital, of all the means of production, and the dictatorship would begin, a dictatorship of the working class, a dictatorship of the proletariat. The state would fade away and true communism would take hold worldwide. Basically, what he thought was that this revolution would come, it would destroy the capitalist system, and communism would naturally take its place all over the world. So what Marxists believe, they believe that a violent revolution will eventually happen and the proletariat will take control of all the means of production, farms, lands, factories, and that the state exists only as a tool to suppress one class in favor of another, and that private property should be abolished. Those are basically the key points of Marxism and of communism. And then eventually there will be a classless society, a society in which no social groups are in conflict, there's no government, and the state will be dismantled organically. And it will be a borderless world with worldwide communes and worker organizations of productions based on needs instead of profits. So we see how important Marx was in the first communist experiment with Imperial Russia becoming Soviet Russia. So by the end of World War I, the Russians, the state sort of collapsed, and there was a coup in which the Bolsheviks under Vladimir Lenin took control of the country and instituted a communist system. The Tsar and his family, who's the emperor, they were killed, and communism took hold in Russia. And the rest of 20th century history was on its way. Communism had arrived. And that's really what Animal Farm is telling the story of in many ways. Thanks. That's Mr. Beckett. Over and out.